pleasure to welcome and introduce to Marius Troseid. The Marius is the associate professor and senior consultant of the infection diseases and clinical immunology at Oslo University Hospital. And now he is also the coordinator of the National Reference Group on COVID-19 treatment in Norway. He is a co-applicant of the Horizon 2020 EU Response Consortium and now the chief investigator for the EU SolidAct, also the platform trial. And we are happy to have you today with us. So Marius, the floor is yours.
Thanks a lot, Regina. I just want to say congratulations to Lenny for a really nice talk and very important work from REMAP-CAP. I think the take-home message from Lenny is really that if you want to do a platform trial during a pandemic, you need to train first and you need to have the platform ready, unless, like Recovery did, moving very fast in one country. So I think when we applied for EU Response and SolidAct last year, the aim was really to make a platform trial that could be ready for the next pandemic. Unfortunately, COVID is still here, so we will now implement the trial, and hopefully we will also be able to answer some clinical important questions for COVID-19. But still, the main focus here is to prepare European countries for the next pandemic. It could also be new variants or COVID or other coronaviruses. So I will just share some of our thoughts on this second generation platform trial, really trying to learn from experiences during this pandemic. I'll show the overall architecture, the modularity and flexibility of the platform, and also some things to consider if you want to try to launch a multinational platform trial during a pandemic. The regulatory issues, legal issues, financial issues, and so on, that are really practical stuff in all trials, but that gets more complicated when you have to do this all in parallel. And also, of course, the race against time, as Lenny talked about. The pandemic and emerging evidence might happen faster than even launching the trial, but also then the future perspective of EU SolidAct. So EU SolidAct is part of EU Response, which is a large consortium which is led by INSERM in France. These are the stakeholders that applied last year. Since then, Germany is also on board, so it's really a pan-European network. EU Response is heading 2 trials. It's the Discovery trial, which was started in France and is now expanding to more and more countries. And in parallel with this, or after Discovery, the plan is to open up SolidAct in the same sites and countries, and then expand to more countries. We are now about to launch the trial, so hopefully we can start end of next week. So we're really working around the clock now with all the practical issues to still try to hit the third wave in some of the countries with SolidAct. We will run the trial in close coordination with the other platform trials in Europe. So there's a trial coordination board, so that the trials can update each other on the status. We share DMC with Discovery, so there are a lot of shared resources here in Europe. We have developed the platform in close dialogue with EMA. So I think one of the main differences between our platform and more pragmatic trials is that we try to make it with enough granularity, with enough data to be able to also run registration trials of new compounds. So this is the overall architecture or setup of the master protocol. If you look at the left-hand side of the slide, it's we have really rather than developing in or dividing in domains from different groups of drugs, we have divided in according to where in the disease state the patient is. So this was really an advice from EMA. I think we know that now that patients that enter hospital early in the disease, they can either progress very fast or they can recover fast, and the primary outcome here is disease progression within 14 days. And in this part of the platform, it will be possible, for example, to test new antiviral compounds alone or in combinations. Whereas if you enter the hospital later in the disease with more advanced disease, so that you have severe COVID, either in the hospital ward or in the ICU, especially if you're put on mechanical ventilator, this can take quite some time. So the primary outcome here is occurrence of death within 60 days. So it's really divided in two, depending on the disease stage and timing. And it will be possible to then test different types of compounds in each part of this platform. It's also possible to have a second randomization. If you enter part A and then progress, you can also then be randomized in part B if the drugs are compatible with each other. We have also introduced modular data capture. We really want this trial to be possible to run in both academic and non-academic hospitals across Europe. And also, if you're overwhelmed with patients, it should be possible only then to enter safety data and endpoint data. But it's also possible to do, for example, biobanking, which is defined as level 2. For example, then if you test an antiviral, you can then look for viral clearance as one of the endpoints. And it's also possible then to add add-on trials, which is defined as level 3. And the point here is to use common protocols in all the sites. The inclusion criteria are very easy. It's hospitalized adult patients with COVID. And then you're divided into SolidAct Part A if you have moderate disease, SolidAct Part B if you have severe or critical disease. The general exclusion criteria are very few, but then of course there will be IMP-specific exclusion criteria depending on which drug that you're testing. We are able to run phase 2 and phase 3 trials. So the sample size is around 1,000 per arm in phase 3, around 200 per arm in phase 2. Based on power calculations. This figure is not really from the protocol. This is from the grant application we sent last year, so it might be modified a bit. But one of the options that we want to be possible in SolidAct is to run phase 2 and phase 3 trials in parallel, and that these trials, at least if they're run at the same time, can share control arms if it's the same disease state for the patients, and that also the data capture is common for phase 2 and phase 3 protocols, even though the endpoints might be different and should be different. And we also hope that it could be possible within this platform if you have a promising phase 2 trial, that you can continue into phase 3 and still keep the data that you gathered in phase 2. Right now, we are focusing on starting the first phase 3 trial in SolidAct Part B for severe disease. At this stage of the pandemic, it's a bit difficult to come up with new IDs that haven't been tested or are not currently tested. We will run baricitinib. It's an oral immunomodulator, a JAK inhibitor. So it's 14 days of baricitinib or placebo. It has shown promising effect in a trial run by Eli Lilly. It didn't meet the primary endpoint, but there seems to be a potential mortality benefit in severe patients. So that's what we want to try to find out. Then some practical issues about trying to launch a platform trial during a pandemic. So the first choice we had to take was should we apply for regulatory approval in one country, in our case Norway, and then try to expand to other countries. This has been done by the Discovery trial, for example, starting in France. Then it's possible to launch the trial earlier, but it's more difficult than to adapt the protocol if national regulatory authorities have different requirements in the different countries. And what about the amendments? That could also be complicated. So the alternative here is to go for a coordinated process in all the involved countries at the same time. And it's possible to do that within the legal or the regulatory framework, something called VHP, the Voluntary Harmonisation Procedure. This will be updated at the end of the year, and I think it's important to test this system and give feedback. It's a harmonized procedure developed for assessing multinational clinical trial in EU. One reference NCA or regulatory authority takes the lead in the scientific assessments and then gathers the responses from all the countries, the so-called grounds for non-acceptance, and passes it back to the investigators. So in our case, this was the national competent authority in Norway who took the lead in this. So what to do? You need to list all the member states that you plan in the trial. You need to gather the core documents, like for instance, for us, it was the master protocol, the sub-protocol, and then UDRA-CT investigation brochure and so on. You need to agree with the reference NCA and clarify if some of the member states also want to do an initial ethical assessment in parallel with the regulatory assessment. So this is called VHP+. And then you need to agree to timelines and stick to the timelines, because this is a coordinated effort done in all the countries at the same time. Here, just to list the countries that took part in our application. I'm not sure that VHP Plus goes any faster for ethical approval than VHP. That's just the feedback to the regulators. But otherwise, I'll show the timeline here. We tried to do a VHP fast track because it was a pandemic, and the question is how fast is fast track here. We had the protocol ready by the beginning of February. Then we needed to get some of the documents from the drug company, and we were ready to submit by February 12. Then it has to be validated. It takes another week. Then in mid-March, we got feedback, 78 grounds for non-acceptance. Each of them needs to be answered satisfactorily to not stop the process. So that was a response letter of 30 pages. But then in the beginning of April, we got the final approval. But after that, there is still a national phase that it needs to be done in all the member states. And by end of last week, we had final approval, both from national competent authorities and ethical approval in Norway and France. And there are more to come now this and the coming weeks. But the fast track is still 3 months plus. So it's, I think for future pandemics, the VHP, if that is going to be used, it needs to be an emergency track as well. Or you need to have the platform ready before the pandemic. Just some words also about budget. It's boring, but it's necessary to have a sufficient budget, and just some factors that decides it. The number of countries. You need to do a national regulatory application. That is costly. You need to insure each country. Some countries needs adaptations and translations to even the protocols that cost money. Number of sites, of course, and you can also then define the level of monitoring if you're going to be very detailed or more risk-based. Complexity of the trial is, of course, important if you go for an open label or placebo. How detailed the data capture is, if you want to include biobanking and so on. And also the possibility to share the control arms. So if you have a large enough budget to run several arms, then each arm will, of course, be less costly. Collaboration with pharma has been necessary for us to lift the trial, but that also comes with a price. You need you are a bit kind of depend on the timelines of the drug companies. And then, of course, there are also lots of logistic issues that needs to be lifted when you plan a trial, and this is not unique for this trial or a platform trial. But the thing is, if you want to try to rapidly establish a platform trial in a pandemic, you need to do a lot of these things in parallel rather than sequential. And for example, the drug distribution, pharmacovigilance are dependent on ECRF and so on.
Marius,
Regina, am I running over time?
Yeah. If we have, let's say, 2 last slides.
Yeah, so I'm actually finalized here. So we are sharing some of the sponsor tasks with ECRIN, who we are outsourcing regulatory approvals and monitoring. INSERM is helping with the pharmacovigilance and data management. And we also try to bring the patients on board in lifting this trial. So patient-related outcome measures is part of the endpoints. We have representatives in the scientific advisory board, and we have had help to develop the informed consent form, especially with the risk-benefit assessments. And we hope to expand the role of the patients in this trial. So to conclude, platform trials are really powerful tools for testing several drugs in parallel, but launching a multinational adaptive platform trial during a pandemic is complex, expensive, and time-consuming. And I think an important role of EU SolidAct is to gather this pan-European network, is to develop a platform trial that is ready to use for future pandemics and to be part of European preparedness. Thanks for the hardworking sponsor team in Oslo and France, in ECRIN. Thanks for all the NCAs who are working on this, and thanks for all the sites that will participate, and thanks for your attention.
Yeah, Marius, thank you very much for your nice presentation. We are happy that SolidAct will start soon. We in Czech Republic will also participate in this. So thank you very much.